honored to be able to rise today to speak on Bill C-57. As I think everyone in this place knows, I've been unequivocal in my support for Ukraine. And that will never cease, not only because I'm proud of my Ukrainian heritage, but Ukraine is in the battle of its life and its very existence. For 607 days, we have watched on TV in real time Russia's illegal invasion. For 607 days, we have watched the barbaric acts of the Russian military. We have watched for 607 days how Russian soldiers have used sexual violence as a weapon, as they raped women and children. For 607 days, we have watched Putin trying to Russify Ukraine and trying to commit another genocide on the soil of Ukraine against the ethnic Ukrainian people. He's trying to emulate exactly what we saw from Joseph Stalin in 1932 and 33 in the Holodomor, except Putin is being much more upfront and aggressive in his mannerisms. And for 607 days, we've witnessed Putin and his kleptocrats in the Kremlin refuse to recognize Ukraine as a nation and the people of Ukraine as a people. But during that 607 days, we have witnessed, against all odds, the people of Ukraine stand up and fight back. We have witnessed their valor, courage, and bravery of the Ukrainian soldiers as they have fought to hold the line. We have witnessed for 607 days the resiliency of the people of Ukraine to not only to fight back, but to continue their lives, to continue to rebuild. After every missile strike, they rebuild. And for 607 days, I don't think Putin anticipated that he would actually unite NATO and our allies to support Ukraine unequivocally in their fight for their freedom against Putin and his Kremlin kleptocrats. You know, it is inherent upon all of us in this House and allies to hold Vladimir Putin and his proxies to account for their war crimes in Ukraine. They have to be brought before the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice. We know for a fact that he has been using sexual violence as a weapon. We know for a fact that they have kidnapped children and families from areas that they currently occupy and have taken those children and put them out in adoption, are now reprogramming them or brainwashing them, Madam Speaker, to be Russians. This is part of Raphael Lemkin's definition under the United Nations Declaration of Genocide of what constitutes a genocide. When you are striking out a people based upon their race or ethnicity or religion, when you are going over there and you're taking people away and replacing them with your own people, and you're taking the children and brainwashing them to become something that they are not. Now, Madam Speaker, as Conservatives, we have been very strong in our support for the people of Ukraine. You know, it goes right back to when we were government under Stephen Harper, and when the first occupation of Crimea started in 2014, and then the Revolution of Dignity on the streets, the Revolution of Dignity started first on the streets in November of 2014. February 2015, we see the actions of the illegal occupation and invasion of Crimea. Then the war breaks out in Donetsk and Luhansk in the Donbass region of Ukraine. And Canada was one of the very first ones in making sure that we provided military support, that we went and started Operation Unifier, and that we started pushing for Ukraine to be included as a member of NATO. And that was all done under Stephen Harper and our Conservative government, something that I'm incredibly proud of. And since 2018 in opposition, we've been calling on this government to do more to help Ukraine. We've asked them to start sending over weapons that originally that we were going to send to help the Kurdish Peshmerga, that those weapons, those rifles, those sniper rifles and ammunitions be sent to Ukraine so that they were prepared in case a hot conflict broke out as we witnessed in February of 2022. We asked them to start providing radar sat images, which did begin, but then of course was canceled started underneath Stephen Harper, but then canceled under Stefan Dion when he was foreign minister under this Liberal government. And only recently, after the hot war broke out in 2022, that the Liberals again reinstated providing those radar sat images so Ukrainians could see what was happening on their ground by the Russian invaders. You know, we have been calling since early last year to take our surplus armored vehicles, our Coyote and Bison Lavs, our light armored vehicles, our track Lavs, our M113s, that are all destined to go to the trash heap. These Liberals under this Prime Minister want to send them to the scrap pile. Ukraine can use them and use them to save lives as well as be able to liberate parts of Ukraine that are currently occupied by the Russian invaders. Now, we know for a fact, Madam Speaker, that we've seen the United States and Australia donate their M113s, and that helped liberate Kharkiv. We should be doing the same thing here, because these vehicles are otherwise just going to be decommissioned and tore up and sent off to be melted down. When we have a company in London, Ontario by the name of Armatech, which is prepared to take those vehicles, refurbish them, and send them to Ukraine to make a serious difference in this war. Now, we know that, you know, we have JDLS in London that are already building armored vehicles for Ukraine, but at much lower rates than what we'd see if we were donating our own older vehicles that are being decommissioned. Now, on the free trade agreement, I'll just reiterate what my colleague from Foothills just said, that we support free trade. We are a party of free trade, and we're going to take our time to read through this very large document. But I was in Ukraine just in August, and I can tell you, Madam Speaker, that they want to do trade with us. They want us to invest. I met with the Minister of Strategic Investment, and he was talking about how we need Canada to come in and invest in industries that will not only support our economy, but also could possibly support our war efforts as well. So there's those opportunities that exist. As someone with an agriculture background, Madam Speaker, I understand how important it is for us to be able to help Ukraine in their agriculture industries and the infrastructure they need to get their commodities market, especially with Russia bombing out their export port facilities in the Black Sea region. So we need to help them with logistics, with infrastructure, and as well as what we can pass on in agriculture production technology. And we know that through trade of things like LNG and ethical oil that we produce here in Canada would displace the Russian oil that right now Ukraine and our European allies are dependent upon. We're going into another winter in Ukraine, and again, they have to continue to use the very natural gas to heat their homes and their buildings from the dictator and his tyrant that he associates himself, Vladimir Putin, and make use of his energy that actually puts cash in his pocket to fuel his war machine against Ukraine. We can't have that happen. Madam Speaker, some of the things that we need to do here in support of Ukraine is actually start building some of the things that we're calling for, especially now that war in Israel is broken out with the terrorist attack by Hamas and the U.S. now supporting Israel in the exchanges that are taking place. There's going to be even more need for Canada to provide munitions to Ukraine. And our production of 155 shells for the 777 howitzers is abysmal. We're only producing around 2,000 rounds a month. And we need to replenish our own stocks, plus we need to make sure that we are providing the munitions to Ukraine so that they can continue on with their attacks. They blow through 2,000 shells in a day, and we're only producing that in 1 month. So we have to step up our production to help Ukraine. We donated already our Leopard tanks, 8 Leopard tanks to Ukraine. We should donate more Leopard tanks. But at the same time, what about buying some new Leopard tanks for our Canadian Armed Forces? Whatever we're going to be giving to Ukraine, we have to make sure that we replace those, like the 777 howitzers, in our own Canadian Armed Forces so that we are prepared. But of course, morale continues to suffer under these Liberals. The troops are leaving at record numbers. We're 16,000 members short. We have a recruiting and retention crisis because of the policies of this Liberal government. Madam Speaker, just in conclusion, I'll just say this. We all continue to pray for peace in Ukraine, but we know that the only way that's possible is that Ukraine must win. They must be victorious. Canada must continue to support them. Slava Ukraini.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to reflect on the power of trade and trade agreements. Back in 2013, as the member across the way would recall, the EU trade agreement and Ukraine's desire, the people's desire to have more trade between the EU, ultimately from my perspective, and I suspect for many, led and could be tracked to what's happening today in Ukraine and Russia, as Russia continues to want to dominate the sovereign nation of Ukraine. Today we have a trade agreement that I suspect everyone's going to be supportive. At least I would hope everyone's going to be supportive. My question to the member is, would he not agree that the power of being able to see this legislation pass, ultimately even before Christmas, goes far beyond just the economic benefits of both countries?
The Honourable Member for Selkirk Interlake Eastman.
Well, Madam Speaker, I just again wanted to thank the member from Abbotsford when he was Minister of Trade that actually started the free trade talks with Ukraine. I was proud to accompany him on one of those trips before we lost government in 2015, but he laid down all the groundwork. This is, of course, additional chapters. One thing that if it's going beyond trade, then I'd recommend, if we're talking about agriculture, for example, why aren't we seeing a section in here on getting rid of the landmines? Right now, the farmers in Ukraine, whether it's in the south of Ukraine, we've heard about some horrific accidents in the Kherson region, as they're out there trying to plant their winter wheat, and land that's been retaken back by the Ukrainian military from the Russians, that the mine densities out in the fields are ridiculous, and it's very dangerous out there. And so we need to be putting more efforts into helping Ukraine demine those areas. But before they can even demine them, Madam Speaker, they actually have to push the Russian invaders back so they can get control of those lands without being fearful of being bombed while they're out there trying to remove those mines.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires? The Honourable Member King Vaughan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have a question for my colleague, because as I listened to his speech, it detailed a very important issue. We heard that this government is going to cut $1 billion out of our military. How can we continue to support these efforts without those funds?
So I made an error, and I shouldn't have recognized the member because she's not sitting in her seat to be asking the question. So I will allow the honourable member, but I do want to remind members that they should be sitting in their seat, that we are not under the previous rules that we were under. The honourable member for Selkirk Interlake Eastman.
Oh, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague from Vaughan for her great question. And I can tell you, Madam Speaker, that this is a very an issue that we have to really be concerned about. The Liberals have already allowed over $10 billion to lapse over the last several years in the national defence budget, money that should have been spent on our armed forces and hasn't been. Our troops are dealing with a number of crises right now within the forces, including the cost of living, housing. We hear stories about them actually going out and asking for donations to help offset those costs. We know that this $1 billion that's coming out now is coming at the wrong time. As I mentioned in my speech, Madam Speaker, that we've donated howitzers and Leopard tanks and armored vehicles to Ukraine. But every time we donate, we also have to make sure we're replenishing our own stocks of munitions and equipment to make sure that our Army, Air Force, and Navy are mobile and expeditionary and can do the job that we call upon them to do from time to time. The world, as we're witnessing, is getting scarier all the time. If we don't have a strong Canadian Armed Forces, they're not going to be able to guarantee our peace, our security, our way of life right here in Canada.
Yeah. Time for a brief question. The honourable member for Port Moody Coquitlam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I wanted to ask the member about the economic impact assessments of free trade agreements and how wide or how narrow those assessments should be, and what the member thinks about the fact that it's missing in this case.
Member for Selkirk Interlake Eastman, a brief answer.
Well, Madam Speaker, I thank the member for her question. I'll just say that this is one of the reasons that we shouldn't be rushing this free trade agreement, is that we need to take the time to look at it, study it. We just had it presented to us over the last few days. and it needs to go to committee and allow stakeholders to have comments on it, to make sure that things like the economic impacts, environmental assessments, and things like that are thoroughly debated to see whether or not they're in the interest of both Canadian exporters as well as Ukrainian importers, and vice versa.